Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And as promised on Friday, I told you I'll be back on Sunday morning, round about now, 11:12 a.m. it is. I trust you are, alhamdulillah, appreciating the last Sunday of the school holidays for now. Back to work if you're a teacher tomorrow. I know many teachers spent many years in the teaching game and dread that early Monday morning when you're back after a holiday, after a vacation, especially listening to the principal's motivational speech when you're not motivated yourself, and for the learners, of course, on Tuesday. Remember, parents in particular, tonight is the night that you're probably waiting for, wherein all those projects that were supposed to be done at the beginning of the holiday make a sudden appearance after Asr time in particular. And maybe tonight, or maybe even it'll delay its presence for tomorrow after Asr, even worse. Nonetheless, we had to discuss this Sunday morning a topic that we spoke about 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago, and that is the sinking of a very famous ship known commonly at least in recent times as the Indian Titanic, and that is the sinking of the SS Tilawa. Now, I remember having a conversation and an interview on this on the 31st of October 2022, right here, around about this time over here, and that was on the back of the 80th anniversary of the sinking of the ship. Why? I mean, ships have been sunk before, especially in World War II. This was in November 1942, and as expected, loss of life occurred across the entire world. That's the nature of warfare and how it's always been. But this particular sinking here affected many South African families, and I would say many families in the Indian diaspora. In the 1940s, and even prior to that, the Indian diaspora was making its movements felt from South Africa to Kenya to Tanzania to Uganda, and then later on towards the 1950s, 60s and 70s, further onwards towards the United Kingdom, Canada, areas in the eastern, the western rather, Indian Ocean, and the eastern when it comes to Fiji, already had a significant Indian diaspora from the 1800s onwards. So the backdrop of our conversation, November 1942, the SS Tilawa sailing from the Ballard Pier in Bombay, now Mumbai, bound for Durban and thereafter Mombasa and Maputo, acting as a troop ship during the Second World War, carrying 732 passengers and 222 crew. Significant number of or mention of those passengers on board, Mullah Qasim Sima, rahmatullah alayh, who survived, alhamdulillah, that particular torpedo attack, as well as others, and many families in Durban could relate to their great-grandfathers or maybe if they're older themselves, parents being on board that ship. 600 tons of cargo, 2,364 bars of silver bullion included in that, which later on will be a topic of our discussion as well. And this vessel here was struck by the submarine I-29 of the Imperial Japanese Navy, somewhere near the Seychelles Island. What was also of note that this particular vessel, the torpedo or the Japanese Navy vessel, came around again. Normally doesn't do so when it attacks or it realizes that it attacked a passenger vehicle, but it had its intent on sinking the vessel. The survivors spending 2 days adrift, finally being rescued in the early hours of November, the 25th of November, by the HMS Birmingham, and a few people later on rescued by the RMS Carthage, many of whom, or the sailors of which, were later on reunited with the survivors of that particular, vessel itself. Well, I'm joined by, a group of brothers, a group of friends who have consistently remained very keen and interested when it comes to the events of that particular day, as well as reacquainting themselves with the history of the SS Tilawa. I'm joined by Brother Harun Tar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Harun.
Wa alaikum assalam, Maulana.
And shukran, jazakallah khair.
Salam to your listeners and to all the people all over the world that are listening.
And of course, Brother Harun joining us here from South Africa. Also, Brother Ashraf, who will be with us for a while. Ashraf Rumani. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ashraf.
Wa alaikum salam, Maulana. Shukr for the opportunity to share our story with the rest of the world.
And indeed, our guest, yes, indeed, our guest from abroad who, an astute, I would say a professor on the subject, if I may use that term, Emil Solanki. Emil, are you joining us all the way from where I got you last time? Was it Ontario, Canada?
Well, greetings to all of you, and it's a real pleasure to be with you. Yes, Toronto, Canada is my home. It's where I'm currently located. But actually, I am speaking to you from Greece. I'm here right now actually on a ancient history tour with a group of pilgrims. We're having a wonderful time. They've actually just gone off to lunch. So it's a perfect opportunity for me to join this call. Thank you so much.
I mean, it looks like you're the quite globetrotter. Now we're talking about, the SS Tilawa on the other side of the Indian Ocean. But you know what? Let me engage with you brothers one at a time. Uncle Harun, the SS Tilawa has always remained, or for a while, has remained an intrigue for many families in South Africa who lost family members and continues to be a source of discussion. I mean, why so? And how are you connected to the SS Tilawa by way of its historical connection, Uncle Harun?
My connection to the Tilawa is that my father and my three uncles were on that ship, and sadly, three of them lost their lives. My father is the only one that survived after being on a raft for 2 days and then being rescued. So the thing is that we didn't actually pay much attention to it because my father most of the people never actually talked about this because they were so traumatized. It only much later after my father had passed on did something just come my way by chance that I got involved in this. And then it really became quite an intriguing adventure for me to find the truth, to look, to dig. And and since 2001, I've been doing this research.
Ashraf, your connection with the SS Tilawa, who was on board and how did you, find interest in pursuing matters related to the sinking of the vessel?
My maternal grandparents were on board the ship, and my aunt, and they perished on board the ship and left my mom and my uncle orphans at a very young age. And that was that piqued my interest in the Tilawa, why she was torpedoed and for what reason. It's been a long journey. I happened to stumble across Harun Bhai after he had an article published in the newspaper, and I discovered there were many others like myself and Harun, including a colleague of ours in Durban, Imran Bova, who had a keen interest on wanting to establish the reasons why that particular tragedy happened and why so little attention was being paid to it by historians.
Emil Solanki, I mean, you are on the opposite part of the world. I mean, as I introduced a little bit about the Indian, Asian, Gujarati diaspora coming out of Western, India, and many of them found themselves in Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, of course, Mauritius, and Reunion. Your interest sparked all the way from Canada and your connection to the vessel, Emil.
Yes, so I actually, when I was engaged in October of 2007, I get a phone call from my father who says that he's just discovered a deep, dark family secret. My grandfather was approaching 80 at the time and found this black and white picture of this gentleman, which was probably taken in the early 40s, and it... my father asks, who is this? And my grandfather says, that's my dad. And my father is in a bit of a shock because the grandfather that he knew turns out to be his uncle, his grandfather's brother. And it became a very touchy subject because, of course, my grandfather was in love with his adopted parents, his aunt and uncle, and nobody ever spoke about this. But now for us, it was this preservation of this lineage. And number two, what is the name of this ship? What happened? Why did it happen? How many people were affected by it? What kind of effort has been made to officially acknowledge the tragedy, to memorialize the loss of life, and how can we connect with other people? Indeed, for me to see that one photograph of this precious life, and to think that he left a 9-year-old son in a village in India who was now overnight an orphan. Thank goodness he had at least one child. Otherwise, I would not be speaking with you today. So that's my connection to the forgotten tragedy.
Emil, while you're on, run us through the events of that particular fateful day, wherein the SS Tilawa had now, departed, then Bombay. We know that, of course, it was a very busy day. Shipping had now, ceased, or at least was erratic on the Indian Ocean because of the events of World War II. It was heightened tension in the area. Many people did want a passage to East Africa, onward to Mombasa after South Africa, and relatives were waiting sometimes up to years for a passage, saving up money, and being unsure about being reconnected to their businesses and homes and families in Africa because of the onset of World War II in the 1940s. That departure of the SS Tilawa, if you could run us through, I know we spoke about this here 2 years ago, but just as a refresher to our listeners, what happened on that day till the time it was sunk?
Well, you've provided such a thorough summary, trying to figure out what I can add to it. But, what we do know is many of these ships were hired by the British government through, as known back then, the government of India. And there were trades going on. There was the transportation of goods, and people, everyday people, would try and jump on board, as it were, for a modest fee to get passage to Africa. It was a very dangerous time to be traveling, and you can appreciate on the north part of the Indian Ocean you had the German U-boats, and on the southern part of the Indian Ocean you had the Japanese Imperial Navy. Now, often ships that were owned by the British Steam Navigation Company would actually have an escort. So it was normal, for example, for HMS Birmingham or SS Carthage to provide company to a cargo passenger vessel to make sure that those goods would be safely transported. It's our understanding that the SS Tilawa was the only passenger ship that was attacked during the Second World War in the middle of the Indian Ocean, about 930 miles north of the Seychelles. And so after being out at sea for a couple of days, it's our understanding that the I-29 Matsu Japanese submarine actually fired one torpedo. It was a bit of a warning. Actually, there is footage of Japanese performing these types of attacks. You can actually watch it. We don't know if they pertain to Tilawa or to another ship in the Indian Ocean, but they had this pattern of firing one torpedo to disable the ship, and then after a period of time, they would sink it. We do not know if there was conflict. We do not know if there was communication. We do not know if the Japanese provided any conditions for not putting the ship down. We also don't know, if people were trying to get off the ship right away. But what we can say, based on some of the stories that we've received, like from Mr. Chonilal Nosaria, that it was about midnight that the torpedo hit. It was a clear full moon night, and they had an opportunity of about 90 minutes to 2 hours to try and get off the ship before the second torpedo was fired. It's my understanding that one of the radio officers did transmit some messaging, but of course, you know, that it was a fateful night. And can you imagine 678 people fighting for dear life, holding on to whatever they could? It's our understanding that there were some lifeboats that were unused. And, you know, 280 people, including my great-grandfather, sadly drowned. So whoever survived, they had to now face barracuda and shark attacks. They didn't have any food. They didn't have any water. Anybody in a lifeboat was able to maybe grab a biscuit if there was a little tin in there. There are accounts of people who were floating, holding on to a raft, and they saw a little onion, and they were trying to save children, and they were feeding that child one layer of onion at a time just to keep them going and sustained, because they didn't know if they would receive any help until the swordfish plane came 2 days later and identified some people.
Emil, thanks for that, that quite rundown. Ashraf, I know you have to leave a little bit in a minute or two. If I could just, quickly engage you before you
I can stay longer, Malana.
Okay.
I can stay longer.
Ashraf, I do recall our conversation last time was that the inquiry as to the behavior of the Japanese Navy. I mean, it's very strange. First of all, the fact that they targeted a passenger liner. And as brutal as any world war may be, there were in fact rules from all sides, both sides, the Allied sides as well as the Axis sides, that we will target military targets, etc. And generally they would stay away from more or less the hassle of now putting down a passenger liner, which in this case they did. And then the fact that they came back a while later to make sure that the thing was now sunk, that in its own right, even though this incident happened 80 plus years ago, is worthy of an inquiry in its own right. Your thoughts on that, Ashraf?
Okay, thank you, Maulana. I wanted to correct the earlier statement you made right at the beginning of the interview. She was not registered as a troop carrier. She certainly was, to the best of our knowledge, registered as a passenger liner at all times, and should not have been used in the war effort. And so the question is, why did the Japanese think she was a threat, why did they find the need to identify her as a target? And there's a lot of theory as to why the Japanese did what they did. It could be they mistook her for a ship, either what they call a merchant cruiser, or as you called it, a troop carrier. Or the British was actually using her in the war effort. And we do know that there were a lot of military personnel on board the ship. Anecdotally, we know that there was some military vehicles on board the ship. And so perhaps the Japanese, the English were not being transparent with the passengers and did not declare that they were actually using the ship in the war effort. And that's why the Japanese found it to be a suitable target, or a legal target, or lawful target, for want of a better term. I've also had somebody give me his view, personal view. I mean, he's a historian of some sort, and he says, in those days, munitions was very expensive, and a torpedo, for example, was very expensive to manufacture. And perhaps, and this was just his speculation, that perhaps the Japanese fired one torpedo, hoping that the one torpedo did the job, discovered it didn't do the job, and waited, and an hour later fired the second torpedo. Could have been a cost-saving exercise. We don't really know. We won't really know until we hear from the Japanese. And the Japanese have been dead silent on this topic. Emil can verify this, but I understand there's some legislation that was passed whereby the Japanese swore not to talk about the war effort ever. And so perhaps you'll never know why the Japanese did what they did.
Uncle Harun, I know you've been listening there and silent up until now, so I wish to engage you. As important as now, 80 years on, as we've been alluding to, the connection that many families have with the drowning of the drowning of the SS Tilawa and their family members. I mean, although it was at that time a few hundred souls, the ancestry and those who are connected to it biologically by way of family members, parents, as of course in your case uncles, etc., are many. Some of the prominent people that you knew and you connected with over the years that also had family members that were on board, who might they be?
Well, prominently it's I did interview Maulana Qasim Sema. May Allah be pleased with him. He actually, just to answer Ashraf's concern about what was on the ship, Maulana was quite clear that he felt that there were military vehicles on deck, and it had been covered up. So that was what Maulana told me at the time when I interviewed him. Going back to the families, there are several families here in Pretoria that are well-known people. We had our teacher, Mr. Morar, who was on the ship. We had Mr. Bula Chita from the New Era Printers printing company. I don't know if you know them. They're very prominent characters.
Aglasha, are you still with us? I think we might just have lost Uncle Ashraf there, Uncle Harun there. I'll come back to Uncle Harun in a while with regards to the connections that, some family members may have, with the... Yes, you were with us, Uncle Harun. Mafi, you just got cut off for a while there. You stopped at the Bula family. All right, I think we'll try and get Uncle Harun there on a better line. Emil, if I could come back to you and engage with you, Emil. In 2017, it's, from an international perspective, it seems that the SS Tilawa re-emerged as a discussion point wherein a company, I think led by a racing driver who probably does this here in his, spare time or free time in the hope of salvaging wrecks, attempted to or did uncover the bars of silver bullion. And this was a subject of discussion as well. Who is the owner of that bullion? And what type of repatriations may be given to the survivors or the family of those survivors? Emil, if I could engage you in that.
Sure. As years go by, the truth surfaces, and there are various layers and complexities to the salvage industry. When you are performing salvage, you need to discern how much is it going to cost to do the survey and the research, how much is it going to cost to go out there with a crew, how much is it going to cost to actually get whatever the item is, and then which country are you going to choose to declare it. Now, when it comes to salvage operations, you've got two options. You've got in rem claims, and you've got in personam claims. So in personam is when you've made an agreement with the owner ahead of time and you say, hey, if I go and get this for you, will you give me a salvage fee? In rem claims often is where you may not have an agreement with the owner, but the country where you're declaring the goods will make sure that you receive a salvage fee. Now, in 2012, 2013, 2017, that period, there is a company called Deep Ocean Search, DOS, Deep Ocean Search. Deep Ocean Search were the ones that completed a survey of Tilawa. They were the ones who did the homework, and Argentum Exploration Limited hired them to then go one step further to now perform the salvage exercise. Argentum Exploration is actually owned not by Ross Hyatt. That's been the media spin. Ross Hyatt is just a director. He's an administrator. He's just following instructions, as it were. But we know that since then, Sir Paul Marshall, Mr. Anthony Clegg, and others who are in the investment hedge fund world, they're the ones that own Argentum. Argentum financed the operation. So for Argentum, it was just another investment opportunity. Now, at the time, they probably felt that they could become the owners of the silver. Nobody ever thought that it would be the Republic of South Africa, because in 1942, the British Empire was the British Empire. And if one part of the British Empire was trading with another part of the British Empire, well, you would assume that it would all come under the crown. Now, when it comes to sovereign immunity, which means that the owner of the bars does not have to pay a salvage fee, that's only if the product is for sovereign usage. And so now, to answer your question directly with this context, in 2020, the Republic of South Africa lost a actual claim of sovereign immunity. The United Kingdom is the place where Argentum chose to declare the silver. And it was established in 2020 by Justice Sir Nigel Tier that the owners were the Republic of South Africa, formerly known the Union of South Africa, but that, they would have to pay a fee. So the Republic of South Africa were financed by another company whom we believe is Odyssey Maritime Exploration. They are another salvage company. And Odyssey Maritime Exploration had approached the Republic of South Africa to do this salvage operation, but Argentum, of course, beat them to it. And so now the Republic of South Africa required this financing to try and claim sovereign immunity. And they had to convince a court in the Court of Appeals that the silver that they purchased for coinage, 80% was for South African coinage and 20% was for Egyptian coinage. They had to convince the court that the silver, when it was on the Tilawa, was in use for commercial, for sovereign purpose, and it was also intended for sovereign purpose. Well, Argentum successfully argued in the Court of Appeals that it was for commercial purpose. And so South Africa lost in the Court of Appeals. Well, the Republic of South Africa would have one more opportunity to appeal to the United Kingdom Supreme Court. And that ruling came out this year in May 2024. And the United Kingdom Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Republic of South Africa that they can claim state sovereign immunity. Now, a couple of weeks before the Supreme Court issued their ruling, the Republic of South Africa and Argentum Exploration Limited came to a settlement. Obviously, both parties did not know what the outcome would be. Now, if the Republic of South Africa waited and they won, they wouldn't have to issue any money. They wouldn't have to come to any settlement, and Argentum would have lost all that money. Just to put this in perspective for your listeners, it costs about $100,000 every single day that you are out there in the ocean. People can spend between 15 to 20 million US to perform these types of salvage operations. So long story short, 2,391 bars were transported. Only 2,364 were apparently discovered and declared. If you salvage over 90% of the item, you've done well. And it is our understanding that behind the scenes, I've been trying to speak to various parties to understand, even though there is a non-disclosure agreement, what happened to the silver bars. One story is that the silver bars were all melted, and South Africa were given 2 from a maritime archaeology perspective, because before they are melted, we view them not just as silver, but we view them as an artifact as well. And artifacts often are worth more. Now, you will not believe what's been going on in the last 2 weeks. these silver bars have become for sale. And they've also sold face plates where they slice off the top of the silver bars with the original serial numbers and the Bombay mint stamp, etc. So we are now trying to find out, are there any more? We were interested from a commemorative perspective, and they've also now produced commemorative silver coin collections. So there are different sides and perspectives to this. A lot of people are not happy because at first glance they think of it as profiteering from a very tragic situation. Some people feel that there should be compensation, but our view is that it's private property. It belongs to the Republic of South Africa, and nobody can demand any personal compensation from that. And then the final point on that, I know I've gone on a little bit, but the final point on that is we, the SS Tilawa Foundation, and myself, the founder of Tilawa in 1942, we are grateful for this salvage operation, even though it cost millions of dollars for Argentum to invest in this, because it resurrected the forgotten tragedy. And it has now given us a platform to leverage where we can now raise further global awareness. And when you look at the progress that has taken place since 2020, it's phenomenal. And now you can go onto the Deep Ocean Search website and you can see the plate, the original Tilawa plate that the robots would have seen when they first went down and saw the wreck site. For us, that is another contributory factor to gaining some closure. And so we have to look at the positives in this and, take it to the next step. So I hope that overview of the silver is helpful to your listeners.
Indeed. Emil, Ashraf, and of course Uncle Harun, we've coming to the tail end of our conversation here. Uncle Harun, I know you got cut off there in the little bit there, and with the upcoming November anniversary as well as get together of the families of the survivors of the SS Tilawa, I wanted to, of course, take our conversation for the next few minutes or so in that particular direction. Uncle Harun, you were mentioning a number of families that had associates and connected to people who survived or passed on in the SS Tilawa. You mentioned, I think when we got cut off at that point, the Bula family and others as well.
Yes, Bula Chita family. And then obviously in Durban, the famous Rendry jewelers, Yunus Bhai Rendry's father, Ibrahim Rendry, was on the ship as well. And then we've got the Bayat family, the Tikli family. There's several families, just too many. But the important thing that I want to just draw everyone's attention to is that on both websites, that's the Tilawa.com, that's sstilawa.com, it's www.sstilawa.com, and Tilawa 1942. Both websites have got the passenger list on it. And, we want people to visit this website and visit the passenger list. You'll be surprised to many people. They won't realize that, their family names appear on that list, and it's quite a important document. Everyone should just visit that. We've had several people calling us and they said they really didn't know that, and then all of a sudden they find their family name is on that list. So, yeah, and then we've got many. There's doctors there's Dr. Dharmesh Chotu. His mother was on the ship. And there's quite a few other families, so it's too many for me to mention.
Yes.
But I'm sure, if you visit the website, you'll pick up quite a few of the names.
Ashraf, if I could engage with you on November the 23rd, I believe that the 82nd anniversary or the commemoration of the sinking of the SS Tilawa is going to take place here in Durban. Talk to us about this. What's happening here in South Africa?
No, we're simply following on what Tilawa in 1942 started. Emil and his dad started some 2-3 years ago. We had the first commemoration in Mumbai from the Ballard Pier, or on the Ballard Pier. It's where the ship set sail from in Mumbai. We had the second one in the UK, in Greenwich Village, I think it was, in last year, because a lot of the survivors they ended up in the UK, and then the final destination, the ship was obviously Durban. So we thought we'll have the third commemoration in Durban. It's going to be held. It's on our website. It's going to be held at a business school, an auditorium in a business school in the Durban area. We're also going to have a gala dinner on the evening of the 23rd for guests that have already confirmed that they are going to attend. The slots are filling up pretty quickly. We have a limited amount of people we can invite. I think we're aiming for 300 people. Arunba, you can just confirm that. And we're more than halfway there already. So, and we haven't even started advertising the event on a radio stations or in print media yet. This is just by word of mouth. So, but you can visit our website, sstilawa.com, and all the details will be on our website.
Harun, any additions to the actual commemoration itself?
Well, no, basically what we're saying is that we're still to find few living survivors as well. And that's why we want people to please, send out copies of these passenger lists. If you can download it and just forward it to people, you'll probably find survivors. We have 3 living survivors at present. There's 2 in Leicester in the UK, and then there's 1 in Cincinnati in the USA. So it'll be great. On that particular day, we will be interviewing these people, and we're getting guests coming from the UK. We're getting guests like Emil will be coming down from Canada. So it's going to be quite a big get-together, and it's going to be quite, you'll pick up a lot of information when people attend this function.
Emil, before we leave you to your Greece trip and your in the rest of your sojourn out there in that part of the world, I was reading the biography or a bit of the story of Chunilal Nosari and others as well, wherein I think it was either him or another a youngster who was a survivor of that ship, left by their mother at the port of Mumbai in the care and the custody of a couple. He was 7 years old, I believe, at that time, of a couple that was headed towards South Africa. Now, although this is quite strange, I don't think even in Canada or anywhere for that matter you will show up at a at a train station or at an airport and say, here's my 7-year-old kid, could you escort them to another country or another continent for that matter. But in addition to people who are not related to anybody on the SS Tilawa, I think the actual stories of the passengers showed a level of trust and a level of community that existed that was really unprecedented, and even I'm sure my kids and my grandkids will find absolutely, marvelous, if I could, use that word. What's your thoughts on that, Emil?
Well, it's a very insightful question because, this was 3 years before the end of the Second World War, and nobody knew that it would end in 3 years, of course. And it was 5 years before the end of British rule in India. And we do understand that obviously there were at times tensions between, the Sikhs, the Muslims and the Hindus. The Goan Christians were kind of left alone, as it were. But generally speaking, the people tried to stick together, and they all lived together in various villages. There was a camaraderie, there was a respect of family values, and there are many stories like the ones that you refer to. There's also another gentleman, Mr. Choto Kushal, whom we met, who was aged 98. He was actually living here in Ontario, Canada, and he was about 16, 17 years old at the time, and he too was kind of cuddled by a random couple just to keep an eye on him. So it's lovely to think that these young people who were venturing out for the very first time, they had to deal with insecurities. They had to deal with the fact that maybe they didn't have a lot of money, or where was that next roti going to come from, as it were, and sharing cigarettes or sharing drinks, for those who were not Muslim. So, but the point is, it was this human gesture, and it's just amazing to hear some of these stories. It also shows that when there is a disaster, the human heart is beyond any faith, because in that moment, everybody was helping each other. People just wanted to make sure that people were surviving. Life is such a gift from Almighty God, and it's just a wonderful reminder that when we do face a tragedy, when we do face a crisis, we need to look out for ways where we can serve our brother or sister next to us. And that was very evident in the Tilawa tragedy story.
Emil, thanks once again for joining us. Hopefully we will meet one another in November when you so arrive in South Africa as our guest. Uncle Ashraf Romani, Jazakumullah khairan for joining us as well, and as well as Uncle Harun. I trust this conversation here was a good one, was an educational one, and at least we've got the message out.
Thank you, Jazakallah, Maulana. You've been very kind to receive us. And
Shukran for the opportunity, man.
Thank you.